Okay, so I'm back ranting about the state of video games at the minute, which is really weird, a really weird situation. Um, I've been a huge fan of video games for since as long as I can remember, really, since about 7 or 8, and over years kind of flip flop between who I really liked, but for the longest time since I was about 16, which is where I seriously started playing games. Um, and collecting games as well, like a couple of years after that. So, um, video games is an odd thing. It's like each phase I get to my life, I always think, oh, I'm done with video games. I don't want to have anything more to do with them. But then they always seem to kind of find a way to sort of keep pulling me back in. And I think it's because the gaming is sort of, in some ways, it's growing with the gamers, because gamers who were 7 or 8 when they started with Mario and Sonic and stuff are now like fully fledged adults in the 30s and 40s, and they still need to appeal to those people. And I think that's kind of the problem, is that like when I was younger, gaming was a young person's thing. It was like a 16, 17-year-old thing. Everyone was getting a PS2 or whatever. And now it's like things have moved on as times have changed. And a lot of those younger kids aren't immediately rushing to buy a new Xbox or a new PlayStation or something. And so it's actually caused a bit of havoc between Xbox and PlayStation. And both of them, for different reasons, are doing really stupid things at the minute that really sort of annoy me. I mean, PlayStation, I said in a previous video, I just completely given up with them. Like, after that pathetic state of play they had with Concord, which looked absolute crap, this game has been in production for 8 years and it looks so generic and shit. I was just like, well, this is what they're doing. They can do it, but I'm not going to give them any money to do it. I've never felt so like ridiculously betrayed by a company. I know it's a silly thing to say because companies have no allegiance anyway; they just want money. But like it felt with PlayStation 4 era, they really went to great lengths to improve the relations with the core PlayStation players who've been there since PS1. Like it really felt like they were trying to get them on board as well as everybody else. And with this, it felt like the PlayStation 5, ever since it launched, there's been a distinct difference in the approach, which has been more based on marketing, lying about things, taking consumer choice away, not really supporting things properly. Like they're an absolute mess. I mean, they released the PS2 VR, didn't make it backwards compatible. First big mistake. Released at a ridiculous price point, nearly £1,000 for the whole thing, and then they wondered why it didn't sell very well. And then they just stopped supporting it. So all those people who paid £1,000 are basically getting no games for it anymore, very few games. It's not getting a decent amount of first party support, and yet they're chucking all their energies into live service games, which clearly isn't working for them. It's clearly a flipping waste of time. I mean, it's like it's the biggest stupid decision they've made since Xbox did the whole famous like Xbox TV thing, where they suddenly decided Xbox One was going to be a device for watching TV and it wasn't really going to play games, or you'd be playing games, but that wasn't the main thing. I do think that was stupid that they did that. I don't know. I still don't. That's even more dumb than what PlayStation are doing. But like you're understanding that people buy a PlayStation mainly to play really high quality single player games. That's if you look at if you look at the past really good games PlayStation, things like God of War, things like Metal Gear Solid, things like Silent Hill 2, like all the great games that have done the best on PlayStation with single player experiences, they've never had a lot of success with online multiplayer games. They've never found the perfect version of Halo. Like they had time splits for a while and that dropped off, but they've never found the perfect sort of online multiplayer game like Halo. They've never had the perfect online multiplayer game like Smash Brothers. They've tried. PlayStation have tried and tried to their own versions of these other online multiplayer games, like Foam Stars, which is a rip-off of Splatoon, bombed. Like the people who are players on PlayStation generally don't give a crap about those multiplayer games. A few might play them. Some percentage of player base obviously plays them on PlayStation, but it's not the main thing people get a PlayStation for. That's what Xbox does pretty well. You know, Xbox used to do multiplayer online games really well, but like Sony chasing this ridiculous idea of all these different live service games. For a start, the Last of Us one got cancelled, and I think that's because Naughty Dog are the only ones to have the balls and the credibility to be able to say to Sony, basically, F off. We're going to make single player games. That's what we're known for. That's what people like us for. But again, because of that silly decision, that means we're going to go a whole generation of PlayStation without a single Naughty Dog game. It's a new game now. That's why they've poured all their efforts into this Last of Us remastered and not stuff. I'm like, on the original Last of Us, I'm like, you're not going to get a new Last of Us game this generation. It's not going to come out on PlayStation 5 now. And you're not going to get a new Naughty Dog game until PlayStation 6. So again, there's just no reason to buy a PlayStation 5 at this point. There really is no reason at all. It's like you might as well stick with your PS4. Most of the games are cross-compatible that were good. The only exception being Final Fantasy Rebirth, which, as I said before, wasn't really that great. Like, it was okay, but there were some problems with it, if I'm honest. Like, it's not a 10 out of 10. It's not a system seller. It's a good game with some problems. Not huge, they're not huge on the grand scale, but they stop it from being a 10 out of 10. It's not as good as a remake. It's not as good as Final Fantasy VII Remake, in my opinion. So, and it needed to be. It needed to be as good as that, if not better, to be honest, to really sell the PlayStation 5. Because this exclusivity thing is kind of killing PlayStation as well. Like, it used to be enough one time for a really good single-player game to sell all this amount of money, and it would be enough for them to just keep going. And now, because of the increasing costs of gaming, making the games, it costs so much more, then they have to make so much more. But so I get that. I get that that's why they're looking at something different. But I'm like, why on earth would you think the solution to that would be live service? Like, there's so many clear examples of live service failing and making little money. Very, very small amount of money. And I think, like, that space is just like what Xbox are doing with TV. It's like you're trying to muscle into a market that already has an established group of people who already have an established product that they already own, and you're trying to wrestle that away from them. Like, how was Xbox TV, whatever the hell it was going to be, going to compete with Netflix and Amazon Prime and all these other streaming services that have been up and running for years? People already subscribed and people already had them. It's like you've got to wrench people away from those services, or at least make it worthwhile to add yours. And I feel it's the same with these live service games. Like, what reason does anyone have to play Concord? It doesn't look particularly great. It doesn't look particularly different from anything else that's out there. It's just such a boring middle-of-the-road game, and it's a shame because PlayStation used to be known for really awesome, cutting-edge, groundbreaking games that broke the mold, like Final Fantasy VII being one of the big ones, actually. The original Final Fantasy VII, and I feel like that kind of energy that PlayStation kicked off with, where it was almost like a very FU attitude to the gaming industry, and they completely like set it on fire and changed it forever kind of thing. It feels like they've gone from being that sort of trailblazing trendsetters to just nothing, like making bland, pointless games that have no identity, that are just like really safe. It's just like they've been cooked up in a boardroom. Like, who's made this thing? Who created this Concord game? And I'm glad, actually, that Concord's bombed. And some people say it's sad. Well, it's not sad. It's bad to say, but I'm actually happy it's bombed. I'm happy it's done so shit, because it looked shit, and it looked like no one in the world actually wanted to play it. And it's like, you should have known that this wasn't going to do well. You should have known that this wasn't going to make you any money. Like, it was obvious from the reaction online. It was obvious from the reaction as soon as it launched on the trailer that no one liked it. Like, if Concord had been a really good live service game that wasn't just a hero shooter, like it was actually more like a Destiny game, or even like a No Man's Sky thing, where it was like a wide open universe, and it was live service, but it was set in that kind of a thing, and it was something different, would have been great. But a hero shooter, like and again, the cinematics were misleading on what it even was. Like, the cinematics didn't even present it as a hero shooter. It made it seem like it was a Guardians of the Galaxy story narrative-based game, which I almost wonder if maybe it was at some point. Maybe in some early version of it, it was meant to be some narrative-based game, and then there's something like this live service push comes out, I'm like, oh, we're going to make it live service now. We can freaking change the whole idea of what it was. I don't know if that happened. But so Sony were in a really weird place. They're technically the market leader. They're technically sort of have won the console war in terms of sales. But I'm like, how do those sales translate to gamers? Like, you've not got as many players as PlayStation 4. You're not going to get as many now. There's no way you're going to get as many because sales are slowing down for it. So, and those people who have PlayStation 5, how many of those are active gamers? How many of those are using it every day? How many of those are playing it every day? How many of those are just letting it sit and gather dust? Because a lot of people are, because there's nothing on it they want to play. So, selling consoles is all well and good, but when you're thinking about looking to the future, you have to bear in mind the number of people who are still playing the freaking thing. This is why the Wii U bombed, because the Wii sold loads of consoles, absolutely. I think it broke records. I think it beat out the other two consoles. But the problem was, a lot of the people who bought them weren't proper gamers. A lot of people who bought them, they played it for a bit, they played Wii Sports, they sat in the corner gathering dust for 2 years. And then Wii U comes out, they're not going to buy that. They're just going to go, well, I've got a Wii. I don't use it anymore, so I'm not going to use this next one, so I'll never bother. And that's why the Wii U bombed, because they had an inflated sense of their own self-worth. Of, yes, they sold a lot of consoles, but how many of those consoles were being played? How many people were actually actively playing on the Wii? A lot of hardcore gamers abandoned the Wii, they didn't even bother with it. So, yes, it sold well, but selling the consoles is only half the battle. You've got to keep the gamers there. You've got to have the player base there and the interest there. And if that's not increasing, you're not going to make more money. You're not going to get more consoles sold. Like, this PlayStation 5 Pro, I think the idea, it's ridiculous now. Well, what gamers are there for it? Like, you've not announced anything for it. Like, there's nothing to buy a PlayStation 5 Pro for. What? Concord? It looks and runs like shit anyway. It's like a PlayStation 5 Pro's not going to make any difference to that. Like, there's nothing to release for it that would make it worth getting a PS5 Pro. And we're talking about a 500-600 quid machine as well. Like, gone are the days where Sony would, like, reduce the price of a console after it launched. Like, I got a PlayStation 1 for half the price it launched with. And admittedly, over time, they used to do things like take bits and pieces out of the console, which made sense because they reduce the components that are in there. They've got to, they're lowering the price, so they take a couple of the things out. But the system still works, it still played games and stuff. And I'm like, I got mad at the time, I think it was like 180 quid, with Resident Evil 2 and Gran Turismo included, and 2 joypads and a memory card. That was an incredible dip value. Like, 2 games, both of which are 50 quid each, which were 2 of the best games that actually were out at the time, and actually still some of the best games ever on PlayStation 1, if I'm honest. Resident Evil 2 and Gran Turismo are still, like, some of the all-timers. Like, that was a great deal. And now it's like, what does PlayStation 5 launch with? Well, if it launched with any games at all, it's 2 shit games that they just want to get rid of. It's not like quality games like it used to be. Like, I laughed because I wasn't really bothered when I got my PlayStation 5, but it was a choice between, like, some really terrible games like Greedfall and I think it was, what was that one that's really bad? Forspoken. I went for Forspoken just because it sounded fun. Like, I was like, it's shit, but I've heard it's shit, but at least it'd be funny shit. Whereas Greedfall just sounds crap. It doesn't sound funny. So I'd seen some of the cutscenes and stuff online of Forspoken, and some of the word like dialogue was really funny. And to be honest, in a gallows sort of way, I quite enjoyed the game. I enjoyed it more than I thought. But it's not a system seller, It's not going to sell any PlayStation 5s, that game. Like, and even the games on PlayStation 5 that have been on the better side of games like Stellar Blade, it is good, but it's not like that good. It's good. Like, it's a good game to play, but it's not a system seller. And I think there's nothing that's like there's a lot of good games on PlayStation 5, but there's nothing that's there's nothing that's next level. There's nothing that would say to me, I need a PlayStation 5 to play this game. There's nothing like that. Not in terms of the graphics, not in terms of the gameplay. There's just a lot of what feel like really good PlayStation 4 games with a bit better graphics, which is okay, it's not bad. But if I'm going to invest a console for 5 years and spend, 500 quid on it, I want to know there's a plan. I want to know where I'm going and that there's a game on the horizon that's going to really take off for that console and be that console's signature game. Part of the reason why exclusives in a way are important is it's the kind of identity that goes with the console. It kind of, you define how people think of your brand through those exclusives. Like, Mario defines Nintendo. Halo defined Xbox. Like, without Halo, Xbox would have been nothing. If they hadn't got Halo early on, Xbox would have fizzled out and died. And I think it shows the value of an IP that you associate with the brand that is always going to be associated with that brand. Even if later that thing goes multi-platform, there's certain games that you just associate with PlayStation. Like Resident Evil. I think first Resident Evil launched on the Saturn as well, but no one gives a shit about that. Like, everyone thinks of PlayStation, they think of Resident Evil. And again, that became cross-platform as well. It went onto Xbox. But it's still essentially a PlayStation franchise. Same way as I think of GTA as a PlayStation thing. Like, yeah, it's on Xbox too, but it's a GTA thing. You just think PlayStation. Like, I always think PlayStation. It started there. In the same way as, like, if one day, I don't know, Halo ever got ported to PlayStation, it's still Xbox. It still comes from there. So Sony just really need to come up with a game, a new Uncharted, a new Last of Us. But I don't mean sequels to those games. I mean a new version of something like that they did back in the day in PlayStation 3 that completely blew people's minds. It was different. It was great. Like Last of Us was such a revolutionary game. Like I can't say enough how much that game changed gaming. Like for me, and instilled my faith in it at a time when I already started to kind of get a bit cynical myself. So I'm like, it can be done. It can be done. It has been done, and yet it's not being done anymore. It's just weird. So PlayStation a weird place. They've kind of won the battle, but they've lost the war. I'd say they've won the battle with Xbox, but they've lost the war for gaming because it doesn't feel like it's a gaming machine anymore. It doesn't feel like it's got anything on it that's worth getting. That's worth getting and upgrading. You know, if you had a PlayStation 4, it's not worth it. I mean, I got one partly because my PlayStation 4 was near enough died and I couldn't really play games anymore. It kept whirring like crazy. So that was part of the reason to get one. But I got one also thinking and hoping that at some point the PlayStation 5 exclusive games would come out and would be worth keeping it for. So that's PlayStation. So I'm done with PlayStation for the time being. Like, I'll see what PS6 has to offer. I'm not even going to attend to PS5 Pro until the day when it's worth. You can buy one, pick one up for dirt cheap, like years later when it's not a thing anymore, and like it's PlayStation's like want a PlayStation 7 or something, and I might just for retro hook. Got a PlayStation 5. Like once to a different generation, might go back and play it. There might be some sort of nostalgia to it, but I can't really see it. PlayStation 6 again, like they're gonna run into a brick wall with PlayStation 6 because they've got they're carrying half a number of players over from 4 to 5. So you've already got a smaller number of people than you had, and you're going to try and pitch another machine that's about 500-600 quid, only a few years after your last one, which you didn't really make the most of. And again, Sony have this like mentality with hardware. If it doesn't sell shitloads straight away, they drop it like a freaking hot potato, and they don't bother supporting it. The Move, the Vita, and now the freaking PlayStation VR 2. I'm like, what you lose people's trust and faith. Like if the PlayStation 6 doesn't sell like gangbangers, are you just abandon that as well? Are you just going to release the same games on PS5? Not coming like I don't know where it goes, and I don't think I think I've said this before, but my trust got shook in PlayStation around the time of PS2, weirdly enough, because I just didn't feel that system was as good as it should have been. Like I know it was highly successful. It's a biggest selling console of all time, but for what PlayStation brought, I expected PlayStation 2 to take it up a level, and it sort of did, but not as much as it should have done. And again, I think if you only ever played PS2, it was fine. It was like there were lots of fine games for PS2. But if you look at what the competition was doing at the time, PlayStation 2 really should have done better, I think. Like, there was Xbox coming on the market at the time. Halo, again, brilliant next-gen game. Really, like, new. Again, it's about having a really new experience. We couldn't play that on PlayStation. You couldn't play that on whatever it was on GameCube. Brilliant, great. Then Halo 2, even better, some people think, and excellent as well. Other games on Xbox were great. I mean, I hated the idea of buying a Microsoft console at first. I thought it was absolutely sucked, but after a while I was like, Fable sounds good. Halo sounds good. Like, Knights of the Republic sounds good. You know, they got the good games, and I was like, and when I played these games, I was like, these feel next gen to me. These feel like there's something different, and something really massively different. And what PlayStation was offering at the time was a lot of sequels to games that were already on PlayStation 1 with nicer graphics. And yeah, they were better. They were a bit better because the graphics were better. Like Metal Gear 2 played better than Metal Gear 1. But I'd even say with Metal Gear 2, it wasn't a better game than Metal Gear 1. Like, the story, the characters didn't it left me cold, Metal Gear 2. Like, I really, honestly, I wanted to love it, and I was overhyped for it. Maybe that was it. But I've played it since, and it still leaves me cold at the end. I still feel like it doesn't feel a cohesive story. It doesn't feel like it started in one place and it went on a logical progression to the ending, like the first and third games do. Like the first and third Metal Gear games really feel like they're very, very well put together, and they start and end in a way that's really, really conclusive, really satisfying. And Metal Gear 2 doesn't. It feels like it goes all over the flipping place. It feels like the story goes off the rails at a certain point, especially towards the end. With loads of plot twists that don't make any sense. It makes it really weird, and then also the whole bait and switch with Raiden and all that stuff. It just didn't feel great at the end of that game. I don't get that emotional high that I get from the end of Metal Gear 1. So I don't think Metal Gear really was better, if I'm honest. Metal Gear 3, it came comes, yeah, Metal Gear 3 is the best one. But still, like, that was a long time into PlayStation 2's life cycle. Plus, it did come out on Xbox too. So, yeah, I'm saying, it's a PlayStation game, but it was on Xbox as well. And it was good. Metal Gear, I'll give you, Metal Gear 3 is one of the best games of all time. So, yeah, they had that. And they had, like, Shadow of the Colossus. But again, Shadow of the Colossus ran like a dog on PlayStation 2. It was really bad. The frame rate was dreadful. It was barely playable on PlayStation 2, really. Like, I mean, it was good. It was a testament to how fucking good the story was and the sort of the visuals of it were good. Because the playing experience was fucking rough on PS2. Like, I remember, like, it judding along, the camera looking terrible. Like, had lots of problems. A lot of games on PS2 that just weren't polished to the way I thought they would be. Like GTA games weren't polished really. Like they had like people running like I've played, went back and replayed San Andreas and like it's fun, but it's not well done. Like it's like when you're hitting people and stuff, it's so goofy. It's like you're just randomly swinging about. There's no proper like aiming tools. Like there's no proper good way to sort of shoot. Like it's very finicky, like actually enacting the stuff. So the idea that there's a mission early on in GTA San Andreas where it's like, oh, you've got to go over and like beat up some dudes who are like drug dealing or something. But in actual reality, it means just walking around a room, standing there, mashing a button until someone walks into your bat and you knock them down and you do it. It's not like the experience of playing it is really, really silly. And the story and setup are good, but the experience is really rough. And it was at the time. I remember at the time feeling like that. So there are a lot of games that are on PS2, I was just like, yeah, it's pretty good, but there's something missing. Like, there's nothing in there in the PS2's history where I was like, this is an all-timer, like 10 out of 10. There was nothing I remember like that. Like, Final Fantasy X was great, but it wasn't perfect at all. Like, it had some issues with how linear it was and certain things about it, like some of it was kind of cheesy. I love 10 now. I mean, don't get me wrong, in the way Final Fantasy's gone since, 10's like one of the best ones, but in a lot of ways it was very good. But again, it still was missing that kind of thing to make it a 10 out of 10 game, in my opinion. It just wasn't a perfect Final Fantasy game. It was a very, very good one. And 12 was the same. So PlayStation 1 had tons of really high quality games I would put up there as like 9 or 10 out of 10 experiences. Resident Evil 2, Gran Turismo, Metal Gear Solid, Driver, loads of really flipping good ones that were like, for the time, they were like 10 out of 10 games. Like, yeah, they're maybe not 10 out of 10 now, but even then, you still can see and appreciate how good they are in a lot of ways. Tomb Raider, first Tomb Raider and second Tomb Raider and stuff was really good ones as well. And I was like, PlayStation 2 era, I mean, for a start, Tomb Raider completely fell off the map on the PlayStation 2. There wasn't a good Tomb Raider that even came out on the PS2. So that immediately disqualifies it from being the best console of all time, in my opinion, for what was a quintessential PlayStation franchise for a long time. And, what the competition was doing, what the stuff was on the GameCube was fucking well better than what's on PlayStation 2. Like, the Wind Waker was brilliant. I remember playing that and being absolutely blown away by it. I'm being like, wow, what a game. Like, and I just didn't want to touch anything on PlayStation 2 for ages. And also, the games I got a GameCube with, Wind Waker, amazing game. Metroid Prime, amazing game. And then Pikmin, like all three of them were absolute freaking class games. And Pikmin 2 is even better. And I'm like, the GameCube might have bombed, but it had some of the best games I've ever played to this day on it still, that I would say was far better than anything I played on PlayStation 2. Way better. And the same thing with Xbox. So I'm like, I look at the three consoles and I go, maybe if you only gamed on PS2, you would say it's the best console of all time. But I think if you were someone who had other consoles at that time, it wasn't that great in comparison to those others. So when we got into PS3, my kind of went down again, like my kind of my appreciation for it, because PS3 launched, fuck all, there was nothing on it. And it was very expensive, and there was no games that looked really great. There was a few games again. It get me like PlayStation 5, like the graphics are great, but I'm like, well, I remember like a MotorStorm game or something looked pretty good, but I was like, but it's not a system seller. Like, where's the actual good games that are like, going to blow my mind, are going to be like next gen, next level? There's nothing. It was just basic stuff. And then eventually with PlayStation 3, it did get going. It had Uncharted 2, which I got with the game. Well, I didn't get it. I got it with like, I got a PS3 with like Ratchet and Clank or something, and I just traded it immediately and got Uncharted 2 because I was like, this game's shit. I just want Uncharted 2. And Uncharted 2, again, to this day, still one of the best games I've ever played. I still never played the whole of any of the other games into the completion. I still need to play 3 as well and 1, but something about Uncharted 2 just hit, man. It was great. Like, I couldn't stop playing it. It was so good. One of the best game experiences I've ever had. And it was funny as well. It had good humour to it. It had a great sense of character, great sense of, the gunplay was great, and it was just brilliant game. Absolutely brilliant. Uncharted 2. And then Uncharted 3 was still good. Probably not the quality of 2, but still really good. And then Last of Us, of course. Brilliant. Like, absolutely. Red Dead Redemption, even the first Red Dead Redemption, people rave over Red Dead Redemption 2, which is also good, but the first one was really flipping good at the time. There were so many games that PlayStation 3 I just think were classics that were really good, and I got really into it. And towards the end, I preferred PlayStation 3 to my Xbox, but both of them were really firing on all cylinders at the time. Like, both PlayStation and Xbox were coming out with amazing games. Little Big Planet on PlayStation 3 was brilliant. And again, it was a completely new idea, completely new IP. It was a really completely different kind of game, and I was blown away by how new it was. And then you had Gears of War that was great, Gears of War 2, and then you had, like, I remember at the time being literally like spoiled for choice, like, flipping heck, I don't know what you'd want to get. I don't want to get a PlayStation 3 to get Little Big Planet, or whether to get an Xbox to get Gears of War and like all that and all this other stuff. There was just so much choice of great gaming all around and all spheres and all places. And now I'm like, well, what's happened to gaming? Like, Xbox has just fallen in on itself. Like, I've got one, and I think I have to be fair and say I think the thing with Xbox that it gets a bit of bad press because this whole multi-format strategy they've got now, and people say, why bother buying an Xbox when it's all coming out on PlayStation? But there is a good reason for some of them are 40s, which is it's a lot more cost effective to have an Xbox, to have Game Pass, because if that Indiana Jones game comes out and I play it for half an hour and I'm like, not really for me, I've not paid 70 quid for it, have I? If you have not a lot of time for games, you're my age, it's much better having Game Pass because you can just try it for a bit. And most games you're not going to play all the way through. Like, you're not like 17 anymore. You have all the time in the world to play the games. You've got to be really selective about if the games are getting longer, but they're overall not as great as they used to be. You've got to really be selective and go, am I going to chuck like 40, 50 hours or 60 hours or whatever it is into like Elden Ring, whatever it is. It's got to be really good for you to be able to do that. And with the Game Pass, it's more cost effective. Like, I know, like, Doom's launching, all these things launching. Yeah, but you're going to pay 70 quid each time when I could just pay 12 quid a month. So to me, that's what people are missing is like the value of Game Pass can't be underestimated for someone who's like me, who doesn't have maybe all the money in the world or all the time in the world. But it makes sense to buy like if that Indiana Jones game, if I was just going to launch for 70 quid, I wouldn't buy it because I just don't have enough money to just buy 70 quid for a game. But if it's on Xbox, if it's on Xbox Game Pass, I'll pay for Xbox Game Pass for a couple of months and have a go at it. And if I don't like it, I just stop Xbox Game Pass. It's like, there's no problem with it. And then, so for me, the Xbox is still worth it because it has that value for money aspect to it, which PlayStation currently doesn't. Now, if PlayStation were going to start adding really good first party titles to their subscription service, like they added, say, the Indiana Jones game onto it and other things onto it, I would start going, well, yeah, there is no point because PlayStation's doing the same thing, but they're not. They're not having first person exclusive titles on PlayStation subscription. And like the problem with that is that the PS Plus subscription is a complete waste of money. I mean, I paid for it for ages, the premium one. I was like, you end up paying premium for games that are like 20 years old. Like, you could have played this 20 years ago. or like a remake of a game from PS4, PS3, and because there's so many of those games and you're paying for it, like you'll end up playing all the games on PlayStation Extra and PlayStation Plus, which by dint of the fact they're not having new games on there, you can spend more of your time playing old ancient games that are good, but I'm like, that shouldn't be what I get a PlayStation 5 for, right? I shouldn't be having it to play a 20-year-old game that I could have played on PlayStation 3 or something. I'm like, that's a good little extra. That's a cool little extra thing. And as a retro game, it's great. But again, you can't justify that price when it's like someone was like, oh, a really good old school like JRPG has come to PlayStation 4, but I'm 5. But I'm like, it's still the same old graphics. It still looks like shit. I'm like, what's the point of having a PlayStation 5 to play this random game that like a few people liked when it came out in 1990 whatever? I'm like, it's not worth it. So their subscription service is actually pulling you away from playing those up to date games because they're not on there. And the ones that were never good, they're getting rid of as well. Like they're getting rid of like, Horizon Forbidden West or something. I'm like, well, that was good. It's good that I was on there and he got rid of it. Anyway, so PlayStation's just a mess all round, even though it's sort of the winner. Xbox is weird because they're basically saying it's got to go multi-format because we can't afford it otherwise. And the thing I want to quickly say about Xbox is the difference between, say, what happened with Xbox and PlayStation is PlayStation's decisions make flip all sense to me. I have no idea why they're making those decisions, why they're doing this stupid live service thing. No idea why they're doing that at all. I'm not sure where that comes from. It's completely out the blue. But with Xbox, I understand it because this is the problem when you've not got enough people with your console to make money. Like, they need to make money. Like, that's every company needs to. And if they've made an Indiana Jones game, that would have been a really expensive game to make. It wouldn't have been something cheap. They've got to look at the checks and balances and go, okay, even if every single person in the world who owns an Xbox gets this on Game Pass or buys it, we're still not making enough money. So we have to put it on PlayStation. Like, it's just a simple calculus of things need to make money. And no one knows the amounts that they expected to make, what they need to make, because we're not just talking about covering our losses. We're not just talking about, breaking even. They want to make a profit. They want to make more money. That's what companies are there for. So, obviously Xbox is for a long time, and I think people have taken for granted just how lucky they've been with Xbox over the last few years, where they've been allowed to sort of release these first-party games exclusive to Xbox, and this honeymoon period of Game Pass and stuff was great, but I was always like, in the back of my head, I was like, it's sort of too good to be true. Like, at some point, this is going to be, someone's going to have to pay for something, because if everyone's an Xbox Game Pass for like 15 quid a month, that's not going to cover the cost of huge games that come out on it. It's not going to, like, how much of that cut do the game makers make? I felt that, like, it was a genuinely great gaming offer, but too good. And now they've made it so good, they've got to sort of put caveats with it. And again, they got a lot of pressure for, kind of a lot of stick for, like, upping the price of Game Pass up to get the day one exclusives. But again, I'm like, it just has to happen. Like, they're not going to make enough money otherwise. If they had sold it like PlayStation 4 did, if it had been like the Xbox, a complete trans PlayStation, every single household had an Xbox, everyone in the world had one, like, pretty much, like, loads of people had one, it was a huge success. Yeah, they wouldn't need to do that. They wouldn't need to up the price that much. And they wouldn't probably need to make it go multi-platform. They'd probably just keep it on Xbox. But they're not selling enough consoles, and they're aware they're not going to sell enough. So I think that in a way they're more smart than PlayStation, because they're at least aware of how the wind's blowing with it, and they know. And I mean, there's no doubt in my mind now that Elder Scrolls is going to be multi-platform. Absolutely none. Elder Scrolls is going to be on PlayStation, whatever. Definitely, it is not going to be an Xbox exclusive, because if they're not going to do it to something like Indiana Jones, and they're not going to do it to something like Doom, what I think is the way that they're looking at it is, if it's a smaller game that doesn't cost millions and billions to make, maybe even something like South of Midnight, for example, but it's a first party game, but it's an indie studio. I don't know how much it costs to make it. It does look good. Maybe a game like that, or a game like Before Night Falls or something, where it's not a huge team, a game like that, maybe that just stays on Xbox, like Pal World. It'll stay on Xbox. That's not going to PlayStation, I think. But anything that is a huge franchise they've spent. I mean, I don't want to know what the budget of Elder Scrolls must be. The amount of years they've played it, they've made it. It must be ridiculous. I wouldn't mind betting that Elder Scrolls for New is the highest, most expensive game that's ever been made. So it would have to come to PlayStation, and there's no way, because the thing that I worry about is, even with it coming to PlayStation, is it going to make enough? I don't know. I don't know if even with PlayStation 5, every PlayStation 5 owner buys it, every Xbox owner buys it, is it making enough to break even? I don't know. We'll find out when and if Elder Scrolls ever materialises. Well, it will at some point. We know it's coming out. But I was always like, well, Elder Scrolls is such an Xbox. Again, back to this idea of identity for games. Xbox is, and Elder Scrolls is always synonymous with Xbox. I'm sorry. I know it's out on other devices. I know it's out on PlayStation. I know it's out on Switch. I always think of Xbox when I think of the Elder Scrolls series. Always, always. And I think most people probably do. But there's no way it's going to be exclusive to Xbox anymore. I just can't see it. I can't see logistically how they're able to do it. And I think the reason why they keep changing their mind and they're coming out and contradicting themselves and making themselves look stupid is because they probably wanted to keep it like that. They probably wanted it not to go multi-platform. They probably wanted all these things, but then someone higher up within the, Xbox is a division within another division, which is obviously Microsoft. And if someone at Microsoft is like, we've given you spent 70 billion on all these studios, you need to start turning a profit now. You need to start bringing in money now. That decision is something they can argue with. Like, they can't turn around and be like, oh, we're not going to do that. They have to do that. And I think that's what's come down the pipe, and that's why they've changed their strategy, because they have to. They have to do that. And so I at least understand the logistics of where that is and how that would work. I think anyone who doesn't get business might just think it's Xbox being stupid, but I'm like, it's not actually. If you think about it, it's just them going, it's them trying to say, we need to make money. We need to keep Xbox going as a brand and as a thing, and probably without it going multi-platform, Xbox wouldn't be able to continue. It would probably be the case that if they didn't make these games multi-platform, they'd just go, right, Xbox is closing, we're not going to bother giving you guys any money. It's just like not making anything, we're just going to forget it. And I think that that's all we can really do, and I think the Xbox controller is still the best controller you can ever get. If you're playing a first-person shooter, Xbox is the best one. I love the interface. I love the way it looks. The Xbox Series X looks way better in the corner of my room than the PlayStation 5 ever did. I think it's a better system. I think it offers better. It can perform slightly worse than PlayStation 5, but it's negligible. It's not really noticeable for most games. And it's backwards compatible, and you can just go out and buy an old Xbox game, chuck it in there, and it works. I'm like, great, why can't PlayStation be like that anymore? Like it used to be back in the day. Like with PlayStation 2, you could get any PlayStation 1 game and put it in and play it. Like that was the real secret to PlayStation 2. Wasn't the PlayStation 2 games. It was the backwards compatibility and the DVD player. Like the DVD player was next level at the time because everyone wanted a DVD player, and the backwards compatibility. How many people had a PlayStation 1 with loads of games? So the games that came out PS2, like I'm saying, there was a lot that weren't good at first or a lot that weren't great, but you have that massive backlog of PS1 games, you're still playing it, so that was one thing. And it's like, why have they given up on that? Why PlayStation just forgot about that? With PlayStation 3, the early versions of them could also play PS2 games, and they took that out of it. But I kind of get the reasoning with that, because they wanted to make more money, and so they wanted to lower the price of the consoles. I said they had to take stuff out of it, but into PlayStation 4, into PlayStation 5, I'm like, you should have put that in there. You should have found a way to get that in there, because that's cool. That's a cool thing. It's backwards compatible with PS4 games, but you have to pay for them. Like, you have to pay for upgrade charges and shit. I'm like, just let people play the freaking games that they already bought. Like, why do we have to have an upgrade charge to play? Why do I have to pay an extra 25 quid to play God of War Ragnarok, for example, from PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5? Like, can you not just upload it, upgrade it for free, which is what Xbox does? So you chuck an old game in like Dragon Age, it upgrades the frame rate and everything it can. It doesn't charge you a single fucking penny for it. You just do it as an extra thing, and I'm like, it shouldn't be a service you're charging for. And it's so wildly indiscriminate with what those charges are. Like, sometimes it's an extra 15 quid to upgrade to PlayStation 5 version. Sometimes it's an extra 5. Like, I upgraded my Spider-Man game for a £5, which is fine. A little £5 to upgrade to the PlayStation 5 version is fine, but sometimes it's like half the price of a freaking game in the first place. 25 quid for God of War. I'm like, no. So, yeah, I mean, I would love it for PlayStation to be multi-format with Xbox. Like, I would love it if the PlayStation nerds would lose their mind, but I'd love it if the Final Fantasy Remake series came to Xbox. Because if it did, I would never get a PlayStation again. I would literally be like, I'm okay with Xbox now. But again, how long will that even be a thing? I don't know. Xbox might just go the way of like uh, Sega. So they're just basically making games, and there's no more consoles. Like, I think they've got one more go around Xbox. Basically, they have one more go around, and then we come to Nintendo, and it's funny how tides have changed with Nintendo, because I think Nintendo are brilliant in the minute. They have been on fire for absolutely years since the Switch came out, and they just keep humiliating, in my opinion, what Xbox and Sony are doing. And they've always sort of done their own thing. There's a phrase like, you run your own race. And that's what they've always done. Nintendo have always run their own race. They've never really tried to compete with. There was a massive competition between Sega and Nintendo back in the day. Massive, and that was dead obvious. But like, once Sega went away, like, I think the thing with the GameCube was that's the last time they were trying to compete on a gaming level with the other consoles, was PS2, Xbox, and GameCube. And unfortunately, sad as it was, my favourite of those three, which is GameCube, did lose out. It didn't sell well enough. And again, like with the GameCube, you saw how quickly a lot of those exclusivity things changed. Because when GameCube first launched, Resident Evil games were going to be exclusive to GameCube. It was no longer going to be a PlayStation thing. Resident Evil 4, exclusive to GameCube. And then they had a deal for like all the others to be GameCube. So there was this whole push of like, Resident Evil's now owned by Nintendo. Resident Evil's going to be a GameCube thing. Resident Evil 4 was a GameCube game. People probably even forgotten it was. It never came out on PlayStation at the time. That was another thing that PlayStation 2 didn't really have in its favour. No freaking Resident Evil games for ages. Now, eventually, it got Res 4, but it took ages for it to come to that platform. And eventually, because of the exclusivity, it took a few years. And it's like, well, that was a problem with GameCube. Their sort of strategy fell apart because there wasn't enough games to sustain the system. And so the publishers didn't want to renew those contracts. They're not, Capcom aren't going to continue to make an exclusive offer to Resident Evil to GameCube. If there's not enough people playing on GameCube, or if GameCube's being sold, they'll switch back to PlayStation because that's where the money is. And that's the unfortunate thing. But now it's working Nintendo's favour, because that means every fucker in the world's wanting to get the game on a Switch because everyone's got one. And the Switch is like, people keep saying, oh, the Switch is slowing down, no one's buying it anymore, they stopped buying it. I'm like, no, they're not. It is not slowing down. Like, they could carry on making that current Switch. I bet we could eke it out for another 2 years before we bring the Switch 2 out. And I'll say there's two reasons why. There's two reasons why the Switch is massively successful, in my opinion. One is it targets families. So each year, as someone who's a dad, myself, you have a new generation of kids who are going to look into getting a Switch. That's not going to be the case with the other consoles. Like, if you, like, say I own a PlayStation 5, right? And Amelia might be able to play it, but I'm never going to be like, right, if she's 2 years old, I'll get her own PlayStation 5. I've got one. She can just play mine. But with the Switch, I've got Switches for everybody. We all have one now. And I've got two younger ones. So once Florence is, say, she's 2. Once she's, say, 7, probably buy her own one. Christopher, buy him his own one. So all of a sudden, you've gone from having 3 Switches to having 5. Because kids each year are growing into the age, a whole new generation of kids every year is growing into the age where they're the right age to be able to get a Switch. And they weren't like 3 years ago, or even last year, but maybe this year they're turning 9, they're turning 10, they're turning 8, and they want a Switch. And the parents are going to get them a Switch for Christmas because they're that age. And every year there's a new generation of kids who are turning at the age where you want to say this, whatever age you deem it possible to get a kid a Switch, they're going to get them one. So it's not going to stop selling. It's because kids are always going to be around, getting into that time where they want to play a game and something. And so, and you can sell multiple of the same console to one household. Like I said, we have 1, 2, 3, we have 3. I've never bought multiple versions of another console before. I've never bought, like, you never catch me getting 3 Xboxes in the same household. It's like, no, we don't need it. We've got one. So they're missing a trick with this handheld thing. They're not understanding. And also, handheld is better for younger people and it's better for older people. It's much more inclusive because that's why the Switch does so well. Like, as an old far, I can take the Switch with me to work. I can take it and play it on my break. I can, someone who, like I said, doesn't have time for gaming, I can game on my Switch like crazy. It's easy to do it. And and I'm imagining, I don't really know what kids are into, but kids coming up who are used to mobile devices, used to thing on phones, can easily play a Switch on the break at school or something. So I'm like, well, win-win. Kids can play it better because it's akin to playing on a mobile, but it's a massively better quality experience than playing on a mobile as well. Like, the controlling is better, the range of games is better, the kind of games is better. So it's a huge upgrade on playing on a mobile phone. Like, there's no contest in it. But also, I think the other thing that people complain about Switch is, oh, it's old, the graphics look shit and stuff. And I'm like, sometimes they do, but there's a whole generation of kids who probably don't care. Like, how good are the graphics on mobile phone games? They're shit. Most of them look like crap. Like, none of them have. I've not seen a mobile phone game yet that looks good, really, visually, where it look like to the standard of what you'd expect on a console. And they did launch a whole load of games on console recently, like high quality games. Like, it was like Death Stranding, something, like a few big games, and they sold terribly. They didn't sell any of them online on mobile because no one's going to pay 35 quid for a game that looks good on a mobile. No one cares about that. It's like the same thing with live service games. No one's going to pay a base fee for a live service game. They'll just play freaking Fortnite on the phone for free, or PUBG or whatever for free. Like, it's not. The market has massively changed. I think Nintendo have. I don't think they've done it out of choice. I think this is just a random thing that's happened. But they've managed to get the Switch out at a time when that was a big thing. People are gaming more mobile devices. And the Switch is kind of a cool thing. It's seen as a cool thing to have. It's not seen as some dorky thing. Like, so I honestly think they could keep it running. Like, I don't think they need to actually. Like, they're not beholden to the same problems that the others find themselves in, because they've not got a player base that's demanding amazing graphics all the time. It's demanding like 60 frames a second, 120 frames a second for all the games. Like, they don't need that. Like, the best selling games of that system are fairly basic still, like Smash Bros. Mario Kart 8 is like 10 years old. You never get Sony or, I suppose they are having games at 10 years old sometimes, but they're still creating new content for Mario Kart 8 as well. Just recently, I've stopped now, but they've created like double the amount of tracks for it and all these extra characters. I'm like, it's brilliant. Like, you're supporting a game 10 years after it came out. And also, like, Nintendo have by sticking to what they know and not trend chasing and not jumped into things without thinking about it. Like, they overthink and they take too long, but they haven't fallen into the same traps that the others have done. Like, they've been very cautious about multiplayer, which some people are annoyed at, and I do think with Switch 2 they need to nail the multiplayer online functionality much better. It is terrible. Like, having to like freaking use a phone app or something. I mean, I am just like, oh, Nintendo, come on. But they haven't flooded the market with pointless multiplayer games. They haven't flooded the market with live service games. They haven't, they've avoided all those traps. Like, the multiplayer games they have that are good are really good. Splatoon works really well. Lots of people like it. Same thing with Smash Brothers. Like, when they get it right, they really get it right, and they don't have the same philosophy. They don't have a philosophy of like, well, what is the latest trend? What does the market tell us that people want? They want this and this and this. They just go with their gut and go, is this a cool idea for a game? Would we like to play this? Would I like to play this? And they go, yeah, I'd like to play a game like Smash Bros, where you get to play as all these Nintendo characters and you're beating everyone up. Yeah, I'd like to play, a Mario Kart, whatever. Like, that's how they've always sort of done it, and they've stuck very closely to that ideology of like, would this be fun to play? Yes. Would it be cool to kind of have a motion control and pretend to be Link and throw, use a sword and that? I mean, yeah, it's cool. Like, I'm not a big fan of Skyward Sword, but a lot of people liked it, and I think it's that ethos that is good. And yeah, they're slow to release stuff. They're really slow, but as I said, as an older person, as an old fogey, it doesn't bother me how long it takes them to make the next whatever game, because I'm like, well, I'm not sitting playing games every day anyway. I'm happy to wait. Like, if the next Mario game's not for 3 years, it doesn't really bother me. I've got a good backlog of really old, great Mario games that I can always go back to because they're like all timers. Like, there's no need for a new one really. You could make no more, and you've got enough that are good. They're still really flipping good, and it's it's amazing to me, even after all this time, people still don't understand that graphics don't make a difference. Graphics don't make a good game, and actually, graphics is what's killing gaming because all these like shitty YouTube channels that have sprung up, like Digital Foundry and stuff, where they're obsessing over the frame rates and this and the frame rate drops and the resolution, and I'm like, people playing games don't really care. Like most people don't care. Yeah, a few do. A few of the high end nerds care, but even a game like Elden Ring, they were bitching about, oh, the frame rate's still not good on Elden Ring. There's still graphical issues with it. I'm like, how many freaking people play that game? How many people bought it? How many people are still playing it? How many people are still raving over it? How many accolades and awards did it get when it came out? Does it really matter that it isn't a locked 60 frames a second? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. It's like we're getting far too embroiled in the freaking technicalities of something and not thinking about, well, what's the actual gaming experience like? What's the actual gameplay of this thing? I mean, there's got to be a quality to it, right? It's got to hit a certain quality. It can't be like some unplayable mess that's like 10 frames a second. But this obsession with games and gaming and like the textures of things and stuff like that, I mean, that is causing games to be more expensive and them delaying things, and that's causing people stress because they know that people looking at these things with an eagle eye, and it has to be brilliant. It has to look brilliant, and it's like, well, if you have some interesting art direction, you go down a sort of a cool idea, a cool visual. You don't actually need. It doesn't need to look photorealistic anymore. Like it doesn't need to do that. It can look just fine, looking something like something else. And what that could be any number of things. It depends on the sort of style you want to go for, but it doesn't need to be photoreal at all. And but still, every game is chasing this photoreal dragon that just doesn't need to be chased anymore. Because it's like, well, what's the point? Like, there's a few games that really benefit from having intense photorealism. It's like it makes the experience better. But the amount of games that get re-released, remastered, redone, and I'm like, that's fine. That's usually fine still to play. Like, and they're not remastered to the point where they look like a current gen game. It's just still like the old gen game. It's just the quality of the textures is better or something. I'm like, still essentially you're looking at an old game. Yeah, it looks a tiny bit better, but it's playing the same thing. And that's why there's so many remasters, I think, because those old games still work really well because the gameplay was really good. And yeah, you just want to upgrade the frame rate a bit, you want to upgrade this and that, absolutely. But essentially, you're playing a 10, 12, whatever your game still. And, you know, I think Nintendo are in the best position they've ever been since the NES. Because I'm not saying we've had a crash. We haven't had a crash in video games like there was in the 80s. But it's definitely, you know, the beginnings of a crisis. Like, the other two are panicking. Xbox and Sony are both internally panicking, I think, because of the lower numbers of people playing games these days to what it used to be. And back in the day, it was Nintendo that sort of emerged from the ashes and reset gaming and sort of brought it back in the 80s. And I feel like they're going to do it now because going into the Switch, they've been in the strongest position they've ever been since the NES. Because all the Super Nintendo really needed to do, because the NES was such a hit. There was so many good games, so much good potential for games and gaming. All the Super Nintendo really needs to do, and admittedly it was a huge thing that it managed to do, and it was amazing, is better, more complicated versions of what was already on the NES. And they did it, and that's the Super NES in a nutshell. Like, most of those games, a lot of them were NES games, and hence the Super Castlevania, Super Mario World, and like, but they're all got their origins, a lot of them in the NES games. It's just their super sort of better graphic version. Admittedly, they had a lot more gameplay aspects to it as well. It wasn't just better graphics, you know, like, that's the thing that I thought was amazing about Super Mario World is then versus now is they made an early version of it that was basically just Mario Brothers 3 with a tiny bit better graphics. And it got massively slated, and the journalists didn't like it. And at the time, they were like, oh, we needed to make this different. And went right back to the drawing board and added loads of new things in to make it a different game. Nowadays, they don't bother doing that. They just go, oh, well, it's what, Assassin's Creed 50, FIFA whatever, like, Call of Duty 500. Just make the same game with a few different textures. pop it out there, it's not going to make any difference. Like, they don't give a shit about changing it. They just keep it exactly the same. They're not bothered about bringing new gameplay aspects to it, or occasionally they do, but mostly they're just trying to do same old with it. And it's a bit depressing, you know. And that's what I think that what I'm getting to is that all Nintendo really needs to do is give us another Switch with better graphics and better online functionality, and better third person party support, maybe better Joy Cons. They don't need to do anything massively different to that. Like, if that's all they do, it's a Switch but better. That will sell fucking shitloads. It will be such a hit. Like, it won't need to do, like, they're not in search for something that people are into. They've got it. People like it. People have got it. It's got an install base. You know, if they make it backwards compatible as well, again, bang, people are going to get it. Kids will get it. Adults will get it. I think it's going to be the biggest selling console of all time, the Switch 2. I think from launch wise, I can't imagine anything doing more in the next few years. Like, it'll outsell PlayStation 6, it'll outsell whatever Xbox is going to do. And I think that what's happened is Xbox and PlayStation have finally come around to the idea that maybe doing a handheld device wouldn't be such a bad idea. But it's years too late. Like, again, and with Sony, with Xbox, well, there's no excuse. They never had a handheld. And in some respects with Xbox, it makes more sense because they never had a handheld, why they're just suddenly deciding on thinking about it now. But with Sony, it's like, why the flip did you give up on the PS Vita? Why on earth did you just abandon that machine and not do anything with it and not continue making more handheld consoles? Because if you'd had the foresight to think about this around the PlayStation 4 era, you could have had a new version of PS Vita that could have rivaled the Switch. And you could have had that out now, and you could have had something on PlayStation 5. Admittedly, the Portal sold really well. It's like, yeah, that's great, but what if it was an actual proper PlayStation handheld? By now, loads of people would have it. And the Portal is great in some ways, but it's massively problematic in others. Like, relying on an internet connection. Sometimes the connection's good, sometimes it's shit. I'm like, imagine a PlayStation Portal, essentially, but being able to play any game you wanted on it without having to worry about the internet connection. Like, take my money, you know. I would have bought that over probably a PlayStation 5. Like, it's so, like, they're missing a trick so much, and by the time they've thought about it and gone, right, we're going to get it out, it's going to be, what, another 5 years before PlayStation Sony have a new handheld out? It's not going to be tomorrow. It won't before Switch 2, and then it'll be after the fact. It'll be like, well, everyone's got a Switch 2 now. Like, who's going to get a PlayStation, whatever? And so they've got no one else to blame for not continuing to support it. Like, I don't know why they didn't continue with it, like the Vita, and like after the Vita, you know, do another PlayStation handheld alongside PlayStation 4, and then you have another one to go with PlayStation 5, and then you'd be breaking it in, you know. You probably get more people playing your shitty live service games on a handheld as well, because it's like, well, they're not going to hold it to the same high standard in terms of graphics as a home console. Like, you could get away with something that looks all crap like Concord because it's just on a small screen. Most people aren't going to care. So, yeah, I don't know what my rant is about, really. I've just finished, but I think, like, it's weird because I used to be a big Sony fanboy and now I'm like a Nintendo fanboy. I used to hate Nintendo and now I'm swapped over, and I think, how did this happen? But just Nintendo seem to know what they're doing, and they've sort of stuck to what they've done best, and because they've kind of not updated themselves and not rushed to jump into new things that much, that's actually been that's worked in their favour. Whereas other, you know, I feel Xbox and PlayStation are both stuck in ruts now. PlayStation haven't sold enough consoles, despite the fact they've sold more than Xbox. It's still not enough compared to what they had. They're desperately trying to figure out a way forward with what seems like no games on the slate. It seems like they decided on live service, and none of these live service games, apart from Helldivers 2, really worked. Suicide Squad bombed, Concord's bombed. So it seems like PlayStation and Sony are in a sort of in a bad situation. And then Xbox is like giving up, even though it's pretty good. Like, it's got a good lineup of games coming out. I think it's got a good variety of games coming out. We've got Fable out next year. They've got Perfect Dark coming down the line. Again, they've got things years away. I know Perfect Dark's not out next year, but I'm like, they have things that are years away that look good that I would get when it comes round to it. So, I'm still erring on the side of Xbox, even though I'm aware that the Xbox Series X is at this point a failure. Like, it's not going to make enough money. I know that, but I have a sort of soft spot for underdog consoles. Like, that's why I love my GameCube. I knew that it wasn't going to make a lot of money. And I love my Wii U. I knew it had bombed and wasn't making a lot of money, but there's something about the underdog consoles that I really, really like. I get a big buzz out of playing on them. And it may be because everyone else is saying, "Oh, they're gonna be shit." All this. The amount of people who shit talk the GameCube at the time, and I was like, What are you shit talking it over? It was brilliant. Like, I still think to this day it's brilliant. Like, I don't know what people thought. Like, I remember someone saying like, "Oh, GameCube was really good, but it was just a shame because it wasn't as good as the other two." And I was like, "What wasn't as good about it? Like, it was a brilliant machine." But anyway, I'm gonna go now. It's just my rant's gone on for too long. I've talked about video games for a long, long time. I am excited for the Switch 2. I'm also not in a rush for it because I've got tons of games to finish on my original Switch. But yeah, I think Nintendo have struck gold with that. And anyway, that's what I'm going to say, and that's why I'm going to go. See you later.